I never thought I'd become the kind of mother who would remind her son who really holds the purse strings. But then again, I never imagined my children would be the type to try selling my home right from under me while I recovered from open heart surgery. The young attorney sitting across from me couldn't hide her shock as I slid the partnership agreement across the polished mahogany table. "Mrs. Cooper, this document gives you controlling interest in Cooper Development Group," she said, her eyes widening as she flipped through the pages. "Yes," I replied, smoothing the wrinkles of my cardigan. Something my son seems to have conveniently forgotten. The monitor beside my hospital bed had beeped steadily for 18 days before any of my children bothered to make an appearance. 18 days where I contemplated what my life had become. 18 days where I realized that the children I had sacrificed everything for now saw me as nothing more than a signature on documents and a key to inheritance. As I sat in the attorney's office, watching Jessica Garcia review the partnership agreement I'd kept locked in my safe for nearly 2 decades, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Andrew might have thought he was cleverly maneuvering his aging mother out of her valuable property, but he'd forgotten one crucial detail. I wasn't just his mother. I was also his boss. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Music had always been the heartbeat of my existence. For 43 years, I taught piano to generations of Riverside Heights children, watching small fingers grow confident on ivory keys, tentative melodies transforming into Chopin and Debussy. My late husband Edward and I had founded Harmony Music Academy in 1978, back when the building on Cherry Lane was barely more than a dilapidated Victorian with good bones and better acoustics. "You're crazy, Maggie," my sister had said when we mortgaged everything for that building. "You could teach from home like everyone else." But Edward and I had bigger dreams. By the time he passed away 11 years ago, Harmony had 15 teachers, over 200 students, and a waiting list that stretched months long. I had stepped back from daily operations but kept my hand in teaching the advanced students until my retirement 5 years ago. The home Edward and I purchased on Maple Avenue had been our sanctuary for over 4 decades. A Victorian painted lady with a wraparound porch, bay windows, and a Japanese meditation garden that had become my refuge after his death. Every corner held memories. The height marks of our children etched into the kitchen doorframe, the dent in the hallway wall. From Andrew's first bicycle, the window seat where Natalie had spent countless hours reading. How quickly they had all moved on after completing their education. How easily they had forgotten the sacrifices we'd made. Andrew, my eldest at 45, had always been ambitious. After business school, he'd approached us about starting a real estate company. "Property in Riverside Heights is going to explode, Dad," he'd insisted over Sunday dinner. "We need to get in now." Edward had been skeptical, but I saw the determination in our son's eyes. The same determination I'd seen when he'd practiced piano scales for hours, not because he loved music, but because he refused to be anything less than perfect. "We could help him get started," I'd suggested to Edward later that night. "Use some of our retirement savings as seed money." Edward had agreed, but with one condition. We maintain controlling interest until the business is established. Make sure everything's properly documented. That partnership agreement, drawn up by Victor Harper when Cooper Development Group was nothing more than an idea, had been Edward's way of protecting our investment. Andrew had chafed at the oversight, initially, but accepted it as the price of parental funding. As his success grew, the agreement seemed to fade from his memory. Or perhaps he simply assumed I had forgotten its existence. Natalie had chosen a different path, building a marketing career in the city. At 42, she'd risen to executive level at a prestigious firm, living in a sleek downtown condo and traveling so frequently that her visits home had dwindled to holidays and the occasional obligation. She called more regularly than her brothers. but our conversations had become increasingly superficial, focused on pleasant trivialities rather than genuine connection. Peter, my youngest at 38, had been a surprise baby, the free spirit, who rejected both the music academy and real estate to pursue technology ventures. Now semi-retired after selling his startup, he spent most of his time traveling the world on his sailboat, sending exotic postcards and expensive gifts in lieu of visits. I had accepted their gradual distancing as the natural course of life. Children grow up, build their own lives, develop their own priorities. I told myself I was fortunate. They were successful, healthy, independent. What more could a mother want? But in those quiet moments, when the house settled around me and the garden offered no answers, I wondered when I had transitioned from mother to obligation. When the genuine delight in their eyes upon seeing me had been replaced by dutiful smiles and surreptitious glances at watches or phones. My 76th birthday in March had crystallized the shift. Andrew and Kathy had invited me for dinner at their sprawling lakeside home, an evening where I sat at the formal dining table watching my grandchildren, Mason engrossed in his phone, Emma offering occasional polite responses to my questions, while Andrew discussed their upcoming vacation to Greece. "You should think about downsizing, Mom," he'd mentioned casually over dessert. "The housing market in your neighborhood is at a premium right now. That property could set you up comfortably for the rest of your life." "I am comfortable," I'd replied, noting how his gaze had flickered toward the bay windows rather than meeting my eyes. "The house suits me perfectly." "It's just so much maintenance," Kathy had added with practiced concern. "All those stairs, that huge garden. We worry about you there alone." I'd been tending my garden and navigating those stairs daily for 11 years since Edward died. Suddenly, at 76, they'd become insurmountable obstacles requiring intervention. Natalie's birthday acknowledgement had come in the form of a text message sent during her lunch break. Peter had sent an orchid arrangement with a card I suspected his assistant had selected. I didn't complain. I smiled and made excuses for them, to friends who asked about my children's absence. After all, wasn't that what mothers did? We understood. We justified. We prioritized their convenience over our disappointment. The chest pain started on a Tuesday morning in early May. I was in the meditation garden, pruning the Japanese maple Edward and I had planted on our 30th anniversary. The discomfort began as a dull pressure that I dismissed as muscle strain, from gardening. By afternoon, it had intensified to a crushing sensation that radiated down my left arm. Even then, I hesitated to call my children. Instead, I called 911 myself, locked the house, and sat calmly on the porch steps waiting for the ambulance, my gardening hat still perched on my head. Martin Lewis from across the street noticed the commotion and hurried over, showing more concern. In those few minutes than my children had in months. "Maggie, what's happening? Are you okay?" he'd asked, genuine worry creasing his face. "Just a little heart trouble," I'd answered with forced lightness. "Nothing to worry about." "I'll let Helen and Frank know," he promised as the paramedics helped me onto the stretcher. "Should I call your kids?" "I'll call them from the hospital," I'd assured him, though I wondered if they would answer. The diagnosis at Lakeside General was definitive. Severe coronary artery blockage requiring immediate bypass surgery. The cardiologist, Dr. Sophia Chen, had explained the procedure with gentle efficiency, her dark eyes serious behind stylish glasses. "Is there someone we should contact to be here with you, Mrs. Cooper?" she'd asked, her clipboard poised. I'd provided my children's contact information, watching as she made notes. Only afterward, being prepped for surgery, did I allow myself to wonder if any of them would come. Andrew answered my call on the fourth ring. "Mom, I'm heading into a meeting." "With investors," he said, his voice carrying that familiar edge of impatience. "I'm in the hospital," I replied simply. "I need bypass surgery tomorrow morning." The pause that followed spoke volumes. "Bypass surgery? That's serious." "Yes, quite serious." "Okay, well, keep me posted. This meeting is crucial. We're trying to save the Riverfront Plaza project, but I'll try to swing by later if I can." He hung up before I could respond. Natalie's phone went straight to voicemail. I left a message she wouldn't return for 3 days. Peter, 12 time zones away in Singapore, sent a text. "Sending positive thoughts your way, Mom. The doctors there are excellent. Let me know if you need anything I can help with from afar." Positive thoughts. From afar. As if emotional support could be transmitted through satellite signals rather than human presence. The night before surgery, I lay awake in the hospital bed. The sounds of the cardiac unit a constant reminder of mortality. No flowers brightened my room. No family member sat in the visitor's chair. A well-meaning nurse had asked if my family would be arriving in the morning, and I'd lied, saying they lived out of state but would be calling before the procedure. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The truth felt too shameful to admit. My children, all living within a 50-mile radius, except Peter, couldn't be bothered to visit their mother before major heart surgery. The procedure itself passed in a haze of anesthesia and pain medication. I emerged to the same empty room, the same absence of familial concern. Dr. Chen checked on me frequently, her manner professional but kind. "Your surgery went very well, Mrs. Cooper," she assured me. "The grafts look excellent. Your heart is stronger than many patients half your age." If only she knew how that same heart was breaking in ways no surgeon could repair. Days passed in the slow rhythm of hospital recovery. I watched other patients receive visitors, spouses holding hands, children bringing home-cooked food, grandchildren leaving crayon drawings taped to walls. The flowers on their windowsills multiplied while mine remained bare. On the 5th day, post-surgery, Andrew finally appeared, dressed impeccably in a business suit, clearly stopping by between appointments. He stayed 37 minutes, most of which he spent answering emails on his phone. "The Riverfront Plaza project is in trouble," he explained, barely looking up. "Investors are getting nervous about the market." He mentioned nothing about my recovery, asked no questions about my health or care. As he prepared to leave, he patted my hand awkwardly. "Oh, and Mom, I've been looking into some really nice retirement communities. Sunset Senior Living has a fantastic setup, very exclusive, lots of activities. We should talk about it when you're feeling better." I noticed his use of "we" as if the decision were a collaborative one rather than him imposing his preference on my life. "I have a home, Andrew," I reminded him. "One I'm quite attached to." "Of course, but these places offer so much more support, and frankly, that house is becoming a liability. The property taxes alone must be eating into your savings." The property taxes that had increased precisely because developers like him had gentrified the neighborhood. "My finances are quite sound," I said firmly. "I don't need to sell my home." Something flickered across his face. Frustration, perhaps, or calculation. "Just something to consider, Mom. You're not getting any younger, and after a health scare like this..." After he left, a nurse came in to check my vital signs. "Your son finally made it," she observed brightly. "Yes," I replied, not elaborating on the brevity or quality of the visit. "Well, you're doing remarkably well for someone who's just had major surgery," she continued, noting my blood pressure. "Dr. Chen is very pleased with your progress." I managed a small smile. "I've always been stubborn about recovery. My late husband used to say I was too determined to stay in bed even when I should." She laughed at that. "The determined ones always heal faster. Speaking of which, Dr. Chen mentioned starting cardiac rehab soon. You'll need some support at home when you're discharged. Will your family be helping with that?" The question hung. In the air, another reminder of absence. "I have wonderful neighbors," I said finally. "They've already offered to assist." It wasn't until the 8th day of my hospitalization that Natalie appeared, immaculately dressed in business casual, her expression a careful blend of concern and detachment. "Mom, I'm so sorry I couldn't come sooner," she said, placing a generic floral arrangement on the windowsill. "This product launch has been absolute chaos." I studied my daughter, noting the subtle signs of stress around her eyes, the way her smile didn't quite reach them. "It's fine, Natalie. I understand busy schedules." She sat perched on the edge of the visitor's chair, as if ready to flee at any moment. "Andrew mentioned you're doing well. The surgery was successful?" "Yes, very. Dr. Chen is pleased with my recovery." "That's good." She glanced around the room, her gaze settling on nothing in particular. "So, have you given any thought to what happens next? After discharge, I mean?" "I'll return home and begin cardiac rehabilitation as an outpatient." Natalie shifted uncomfortably. "Andrew mentioned Sunset Senior Living. I looked it up. It seems really nice, Mom. Lots of people your age, structured activities, medical staff, on site." There it was again. The gentle push toward surrendering my independence, packaged as concern for my well-being. "I prefer my own home," I stated simply. "But after major surgery, I've already arranged for home health services for the initial recovery period. My neighbors Frank and Helen have organized a meal rotation. Grace has offered to drive me to appointments. I'll be well supported." Natalie frowned slightly. "Neighbors aren't the same as family, Mom." "No," I agreed quietly. "They're not. Yet, they've been present in ways family hasn't." The pointed comment hung between us. Natalie flushed, but offered no apology or explanation. Instead, she changed the subject, filling the next 15 minutes with anecdotes about her recent business trip to Chicago, carefully neutral topics that required no emotional investment from either of us. When she left with a promise to call soon, I turned my attention to the window, watching clouds drift across the spring sky. The medication tray arrived with my afternoon doses, delivered by a different nurse than my usual one. "New prescriptions from Dr. Chen," she explained, handing me a small paper cup with unfamiliar pills. Something about her manner struck me as odd. A slight nervousness, an avoidance of eye contact. I'd been a piano teacher long enough to recognize when someone was hiding something. "These look different from my morning medication," I observed, not yet taking the cup. "Could you double-check the orders, please?" She hesitated briefly. "They're definitely your prescribed medications, Mrs. Cooper. Dr. Chen adjusted your regimen this morning." "That's strange. Dr. Chen didn't mention any changes during her rounds. Doctors sometimes update orders without discussing every detail with patients," she replied, her tone slightly dismissive. "These will help with your recovery." Perhaps it was the subtle condescension in her voice, or perhaps it was the culmination of days feeling vulnerable and overlooked, but something prompted me to assert myself. "I'd like to speak with Dr. Chen before taking any new medications," I said firmly. "Or the charge nurse, if Dr. Chen isn't available." The nurse's expression tightened. "That's not necessary." "I believe it is," I interrupted, keeping my voice level but determined. "I'd like verification of any changes to my treatment plan." With visible reluctance, she took back the cup and left the room. 20 minutes later, Dr. Chen appeared, brow furrowed in concern. "Mrs. Cooper, there seems to be some confusion about your medication," she said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "I didn't order any changes to your prescriptions today." Chill settled over me. "The nurse brought different pills than my usual ones." Dr. Chen's expression darkened. "That's extremely concerning. I'll investigate this immediately. In the meantime, I'm ordering a complete review of your medication, administration records, and I'll assign a different nurse to your care." After she left, I sat in the hospital bed, mind racing. Had there been a simple mix-up, a clerical error in the busy hospital system? Or was something more troubling at play? That evening, Dr. Chen returned with a hospital administrator and security. "Officer." "Mrs. Cooper," she began, her tone measured but serious. We've reviewed the situation with your medication. There was indeed an unauthorized change entered into your electronic medical record, a substantial increase in your blood pressure medication that could have caused dangerous drops in pressure, dizziness, confusion, and potentially falls. How did this happen? I asked, my teacher's instinct for detecting dishonesty now fully alert. The administrator cleared his throat. The order was entered remotely, using credentials that we're still investigating. But we have reason to believe this wasn't a random error or system glitch? What do you mean? The change was very specific, Dr. Chen explained. The dosage selected would likely cause significant side effects that mimic cognitive impairment, especially in someone recovering from cardiac surgery. The security officer spoke next. Mrs. Cooper, is there anyone who might have reason to want you to appear mentally compromised or physically incapacitated? This type of targeted medication change is unusual. The question hung in the air as pieces began falling into place. Andrew's sudden interest in selling my home, his push toward assisted living, his mention of my advanced age and health concerns. I need to make a phone call, I said quietly, and then I believe I should speak with my attorney. That night, I called Victor Harper from my hospital room. Victor had been Edward's attorney and friend for over 30 years, handling everything from the Music Academy's incorporation to our personal estate planning. Victor, I need your help, I said when he answered. And I need absolute discretion. Of course, Maggie. What's happened? I explained the situation, the heart surgery, my children's absence, Andrew's push for me to sell my home, and now the EI's suspicious medication incident. I need you to retrieve something from my home safe, I continued. The partnership agreement for Cooper Development Group, and I'd like you to bring in someone who specializes in elder law. Victor's voice turned grave. You think Andrew is behind the medication tampering? I don't know for certain, but I know my son is in financial trouble, wants my property, and stands to benefit if I'm declared incompetent. I'll come first, thing tomorrow, Victor promised, and I'll bring Jessica Garcia. She's the best elder law specialist in the state. After hanging up, I thought about the partnership agreement locked in my home safe. When Andrew had started Cooper Development Group 20 years ago, Edward and I had contributed nearly our entire retirement savings as initial capital, with the explicit condition that we maintain controlling interest until the company was well established. Andrew had been so eager for the funding that he'd readily agreed to the terms, signing the agreement without much scrutiny. As his business grew and flourished, he'd bought out portions of our interest over the years, but had never completed the full buyout. Edward and I had been content to keep our remaining shares, seeing them as both an investment and insurance. After Edward's death, I'd chosen not to remind Andrew of my continuing ownership stake. He sent regular dividend checks that I quietly reinvested, and I stayed out of his business affairs, trusting him to manage the company responsibly. Now I wondered if that trust had been misplaced. If Andrew was desperate enough to try manipulating my medication, how dire was his financial situation? And what would he do when he discovered I still held the legal power to scrutinize his business dealings? As I drifted toward sleep in the sterile hospital room, my thoughts turned to Edward. What would he advise in this situation? His voice seemed to whisper from memory, trust, but verify, and never let anyone, even our children, mistake your kindness for weakness. Tomorrow would bring Victor, the partnership agreement, and the first steps toward protecting myself from the unthinkable, the need to defend myself against my own son. The morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting thin stripes across my bed as I waited for Victor. My discharge was scheduled for tomorrow, a prospect that should have brought relief, but instead filled me with a strange apprehension. After 18 days in the sterile safety of Lakeside General, returning to my empty house felt both welcoming and daunting. A soft knock on the door announced Victor's arrival. He entered with Jessica Garcia, both carrying leather portfolios. That suggested serious business. Maggie, Victor said warmly. taking my hand between both of his. Time had turned his once black hair completely silver, but his sharp blue eyes remained unchanged, perceptive and kind behind tortoiseshell glasses. "You're looking remarkably well for someone who's had their chest cracked open." "Determination runs in my blood," I replied with a small smile, along with a healthy dose of indignation, apparently. He introduced Jessica formally, a woman in her early 40s with an air of quiet competence and a handshake that conveyed both strength and empathy. "Mrs. Cooper, I've reviewed your situation based on Victor's briefing," she said, pulling a chair beside my bed while Victor took the other. "What you're describing potentially involves several concerning legal issues, possible medical tampering, undue influence, and attempted financial exploitation. Please, call me Maggie," I insisted. "And yes, that's my concern as well, though I still find it difficult to believe my own son would go this far." Victor placed a manila envelope on the bed beside me. "I retrieved the partnership agreement from your safe as requested. It's all there, Maggie. The original document, amendments, and the partial buyback records. You still hold 42% ownership of Cooper Development Group." I opened the envelope with careful fingers, examining the papers that represented not just legal ownership, but the trust Edward and I had placed in our son. The partnership agreement looked exactly as I remembered, formal legal language establishing that while Andrew would serve as managing partner with day-to-day operational control, major decisions required approval from all partners holding more than 25% interest. "Is this still legally binding?" I asked, running my fingers over Edward's signature, a pang of grief mingling with my concern. "It's been almost 20 years. "Absolutely," Jessica confirmed, scanning the document. "There's no sunset clause or expiration date. Unless you've signed something relinquishing your ownership, which I gather you haven't, this remains in full effect." "No, I've never signed anything of the sort. Andrew sends quarterly dividend payments, though they've decreased over the past year. I assumed business was simply in a downturn." Victor and Jessica exchanged glances. "Maggie," Victor said gently, "before we proceed, I need to ask, what do you want to accomplish here? Are you looking to assert control over the business, force Andrew out, or simply protect yourself from his apparent attempts to control your assets?" The question gave me pause. Despite everything, Andrew was still my son, the little boy who had once curled in my lap during thunderstorms, the teenager who had worked summer jobs to buy me concert tickets for my birthday, the young man who had danced with me at his wedding, with genuine affection in his eyes. When had that person disappeared? Or had I simply failed to notice the gradual transformation until this crisis forced me to see clearly? "I want to protect myself," I said finally. "I want to return home safely, maintain my independence, and ensure no one, not even my children, can make decisions about my life or property without my consent." Jessica nodded. "That's entirely reasonable. Based on what you've shared about the medication incident, I recommend we take several immediate steps." She outlined a comprehensive plan. Filing for a protective order to prevent Andrew from making medical decisions on my behalf, drafting a new advanced healthcare directive naming someone trustworthy as my medical proxy, accelerating the process of updating my will and estate planning documents, and installing security measures at my home. "What about the partnership agreement?" I asked. "Should I confront Andrew about my ownership stake?" "Not immediately," Victor advised. "This document gives you significant leverage, but timing is crucial. I suggest we keep it in reserve until we understand the full scope of Andrew's actions and intentions." "When does your doctor plan to discharge you?" Jessica asked, making notes in a sleek leather-bound planner. "Tomorrow morning, assuming my final tests come back normal." "Where will you go? Is your home prepared for your return?" I hesitated. That's part of the problem. Andrew has been pushing for me to go directly to Sunset Senior Living for recovery, but I'm certain that's a pretext to get me out of my house. "I haven't been home in nearly 3 weeks. I don't know what condition it's in, or if Andrew has already taken steps regarding the property. I can help with that, Victor offered. My wife Caroline would be happy to check on your house today. Make sure everything's in order. We could also arrange for a home health aide for your first week back. Thank you, I said, touched by his thoughtfulness. My neighbor Helen Parker has my spare key. She's been collecting my mail and watering the plants in the meditation garden. We spent the next hour developing a strategy, signing documents, and making arrangements. By the time Victor and Jessica left, I felt both exhausted and fortified. Like a general who had deployed troops for a battle I'd never anticipated fighting, especially not against my own son. Dr. Chen stopped by during afternoon rounds, reviewing my discharge instructions and medication plan. We've implemented additional security protocols for your records, she assured me. No changes can be made without direct verification from me or the chief of cardiology. Thank you, I said. Have you determined who altered my medication orders? Her expression turned guarded. Our investigation is ongoing. The credentials used belong to a staff physician, but we have reason to believe they were accessed without authorization. Hospital administration is taking this very seriously, Mrs. Cooper. I nodded, reading between the lines. They suspected but couldn't yet prove outside interference, possibly from someone connected to me. I'll be frank, Dr. Chen continued, lowering her voice slightly. The medication change was sophisticated, not something a layperson would typically. No to request. It suggests either medical knowledge or careful research. The implication hung in the air. Andrew's wife, Kathy, had been a pharmaceutical sales representative before leaving to raise their children. She would know about medication interactions, side effects, dosing protocols. I understand, I said quietly, and I'll be taking precautions when I return home. Dr. Chen squeezed my hand gently. Good. You're one of my strongest patients, Mrs. Cooper. But even strong people need protection sometimes. After she left, I sat with my thoughts, trying to reconcile the dedicated mother. I'd always been with this new role as adversary to my own child. What had I missed? What signs had I overlooked as Andrew changed from the son who had once been so proud to introduce me to his college friends to a man who would potentially tamper with my medication to gain control of my property? My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Stopping by around 6. Need to discuss discharge plans. Have brochures from Sunset Senior Living. I didn't respond immediately, considering Victor's advice about keeping my knowledge and suspicions concealed for now. Finally, I typed, "Looking forward to seeing you." The 3 simple words felt like a performance, a role I was playing in a drama with stakes far higher than any recital I'd prepared my students for. Andrew arrived precisely at 6, carrying a glossy folder emblazoned with the Sunset Senior Living logo. He wore the practiced smile of a salesman, the same expression I'd seen him use with potential investors at charity functions. "Mom, you're looking so much better," he said, bending to kiss my cheek. The familiarity of the gesture felt suddenly foreign, as if performed by a stranger wearing my son's face. "Thank you. Dr. Chen says I'm recovering well." He settled into the visitor's chair, immediately opening the folder. "So I've been doing some research. Sunset has a specialized cardiac recovery program, physical therapy, nutrition counseling, round-the-clock nursing. It's the perfect transition before you go home." I noted his phrasing, "before you go home," not instead of going home. A subtle distinction, but an important one. "That's thoughtful, Andrew, but Dr. Chen has already arranged home health services. I'll be returning to Maple Avenue tomorrow." His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Mom, be reasonable. You've just had major surgery. Your house has stairs, that enormous garden to maintain. Sunset would be much more practical." "Practical for whom?" The blunt question seemed to catch him off guard. "For you, of course. For your recovery." "Interesting, because it seems more practical for you if I'm not in my home." A flicker of something. Alarm? Annoyance? Crossed his face before his expression smoothed back into concerned sun mode. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. I kept my voice calm, remembering Victor's advice not to reveal too much too soon. Andrew, I've lived in that house for 42 years. I raised you and your siblings there. I've managed fine since your father died, including maintaining the garden that apparently now concerns you so deeply. The situation is different now. You're older, recovering from heart surgery. I am recovering well and have a support system in place. He leaned forward, switching tactics. Mom, I'm worried about you. The doctor mentioned you've been experiencing some confusion, inappropriate suspicion. It's not uncommon after cardiac surgery, especially in patients your age. The calculated lie stole my breath more effectively than any heart condition. Dr. Chen had said nothing of the sort. In fact, she had repeatedly praised my mental clarity throughout my recovery. Which doctor told you that? I asked, keeping my voice neutral with effort. Dr. Marshall. He mentioned you refused medication yesterday, seemed paranoid about the nursing staff. Dr. Marshall. A name I'd never heard, a physician who had never treated me. The fabrication was so blatant it would have been laughable if it weren't so chilling. I see, I said, folding my hands in my lap to hide their slight tremor. Not from fear, but from suppressed anger. Well, I'd be happy to have Dr. Chen discuss my cognitive status with you. She's been quite pleased with all aspects of my recovery. Andrew's expression flickered again before he pivoted smoothly. That won't be necessary. I'm just concerned, that's all. The house is a lot to manage. And frankly, Mom, property values in your neighborhood have skyrocketed. You're sitting on a gold mine that could fund decades of comfortable living with professional care. There it was, the real agenda, thinly veiled beneath filial concern. My home is not an investment property, Andrew. It's where I live, where I intend to continue living. His facade of patience cracked slightly. You're being stubborn. This isn't just about what you want. It's about what's practical, what makes financial sense. Since when do you manage my finances? I asked mildly. The question seemed to unsettle him. I just meant, he gathered himself. The Riverfront Plaza project has hit some regulatory snags. The investors are getting anxious. If I could show them additional capital backing, it would stabilize the situation. And my house would provide that capital. It's an option worth considering, for both our benefits. I studied my son's face, the familiar features that now seemed rearranged into someone I barely recognized. The desperate edge to his persuasion suggested financial troubles beyond what he was admitting. I'm tired, Andrew, I said finally. We can discuss this another time. For now, I'll be returning home tomorrow as planned. Frustration flickered across his face. Mom, is there something wrong with the Riverfront Plaza project that you're not telling me about? I interrupted gently. His expression shuddered immediately. Of course not. It's just the usual development hurdles. Nothing to worry about. I'm glad to hear it, I replied, not believing him for a moment. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to rest. After he left, I immediately texted Victor. Need to know the financial status of Cooper Development Group and the Riverfront Plaza project specifically. Andrew just confirmed he wants my property to shore up investor confidence. Victor's response came within minutes. Already on it. Jessica has a forensic accountant reviewing public records. We'll update tomorrow before your discharge. I settled back against the hospital pillows, mind racing despite my genuine fatigue. Tomorrow I would return home, but to what? A son, potentially, desperate enough to manipulate my medication, a house that represented both my sanctuary and his financial salvation, and a business partnership that might be the only leverage protecting me from his schemes. Sleep eluded me that night, my thoughts circling back to earlier days when Andrew would come to me with school projects. seeking my guidance and approval. He had always been ambitious, determined to exceed expectations. But when had ambition curdled into something darker? When had I become an obstacle rather than a mother in his eyes? Morning brought a flurry of discharge activities, final checkups, medication reviews, paperwork. Dr. Chen herself came to say goodbye, pressing a card into my hand with her personal cell phone number. "Call me directly if anything feels wrong," she said quietly. And I mean anything. Physical symptoms, medication concerns, unexpected changes to your home care schedule. Her emphasis told me she understood more than she could officially acknowledge about my situation. "I will," I promised. "Thank you for everything." As the nurse helped me into the wheelchair required by hospital policy for discharge, my phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "Caroline has prepared your house. Everything in order. Security company installed basic system. Helen brought fresh flowers. I'll meet you there." The simple message brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Kindness from friends when family had failed me. A hospital volunteer wheeled me to the entrance where a medical transport service waited instead of my son or daughter. Another text pinged. "Sorry, can't pick you up. Emergency meeting with investors. Natalie tied up with client presentation. We'll check on you tonight. Andrew." The medical transport driver was a pleasant young man who made conversation about the spring weather as he drove me home. When we turned onto Maple Avenue, my heart quickened at the sight of my Victorian painted lady. The perennial beds along the front walkway were blooming with spring bulbs, tulips, daffodils, and hyacinths creating a riot of color I hadn't anticipated. Someone, Helen most likely, had tended them in my absence. Victor's sedan sat in the driveway beside an unfamiliar car that must belong to the home health aide. As the transport driver helped me from the vehicle, the front door opened to reveal Victor, Caroline, and Helen, their faces wreathed in welcoming smiles. "Welcome home, Maggie," Helen called, coming down the steps to embrace me gently, mindful of my healing chest. At 72, Helen Parker remained remarkably spry, her silver hair cut in a fashionable bob that framed bright hazel eyes. "The garden has missed you terribly." "Not as much as I've missed it," I replied, blinking back unexpected tears. Caroline, Victor's wife, gave me a careful hug as well. "We've got everything ready for you. Fresh sheets on the bed, food in the refrigerator, and I made a pot of my famous chicken soup. You'll scare away what little appetite I have with all this fuss," I protested, though the warmth of their welcome was precisely what my heart needed. Victor introduced the home health aide, Lucia Rodriguez, a competent-looking woman in her 50s who would be staying with me for the first critical week of home recovery. "She comes highly recommended by Dr. Chen," he assured me. Together, they helped me inside, where I paused in the entryway, absorbing the familiar comfort of my home. Nothing appeared disturbed or out of place. The grandfather clock Edward had restored ticked steadily in the hallway. Fresh flowers graced the side table. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass panel above the door, casting colored patterns across the hardwood floor. "Everything looks perfect," I said, turning to thank them. "Not quite everything," Victor said, his expression turning serious. "We need to talk, Maggie, in private." Helen and Caroline exchanged glances. "We'll get lunch ready," Caroline offered tactfully. "Come along, Helen." As they retreated to the kitchen, Victor guided me to the living room, where I settled into my favorite armchair by the bay window overlooking the front garden. Lucia discreetly busied herself arranging my medication on the dining room table, within earshot if I needed assistance but giving us privacy for conversation. "What is it?" I asked, noting the tension in Victor's posture as he sat across from me. "Jessica's forensic accountant found some concerning information," he began, keeping his voice low. "Cooper Development Group is in serious financial trouble. The Riverfront Plaza project is substantially over budget with major environmental compliance issues that weren't properly addressed in the planning phase. Several major investors have pulled out. How serious? Serious enough that without a significant influx of capital within the next 30 days, the company could face bankruptcy. Andrew has personally guaranteed several of the loans. The revelation hit harder than I'd expected. Despite my suspicions about Andrew's motives, hearing confirmation of his financial desperation made my heart ache. Not just for myself, but for him. For the pressure he must feel, the fear driving his increasingly desperate actions. There's more, Victor continued reluctantly. While you were hospitalized, Andrew filed paperwork to establish a power of attorney for you. He claimed it was executed last year, but the notarization is suspicious. Jessica thinks it's potentially fraudulent. A power of attorney would give him control over my assets, I said slowly, the implications crystallizing. Including my house. Yes, and there's evidence he's already had preliminary discussions with Riverside Development Partners about selling the property for a teardown and luxury condo project. The betrayal stole my breath more effectively than any cardiac event. My son hadn't just been pushing me toward assisted living. He had actually been taking concrete steps to sell my home while I lay in a hospital bed. Is the power of attorney currently valid? I asked, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. No. Jessica has already filed an emergency injunction based on the questionable notarization. No action can be taken under that document pending a hearing. I gazed out at my front garden, at the Japanese maple Edward and I had planted the year Andrew was born, now mature and graceful. How many times had Andrew climbed that tree as a child, laughing as the delicate branches swayed beneath? Him? How many family photographs had been taken with that tree as backdrop, marking birthdays, graduations, holidays? What do you recommend? I asked finally. We have several options. The partnership agreement gives you leverage. Andrew can't sell. Company assets without your approval as a 42% owner. We could use that to force him to back off from your property. Or we could take a more aggressive approach. File fraud charges regarding the power of attorney. Report the medication tampering incident to the police. Seek a restraining order. Both paths led to irrevocable damage to my relationship with my son. Yet doing nothing would leave me vulnerable to further manipulation. Or worse. There's one more thing you should know, Victor added gently. When Caroline was checking your house yesterday, she found something concerning in the study. It appears someone has been searching through your files. The safe was untouched, thankfully, but your desk and filing cabinet showed signs of being rifled through. My hands tightened on the arms of my chair. Not content with attempting to manipulate my medical care or forge legal documents, Andrew had invaded my home, violated my privacy. I need time to think, I said quietly. Before I decide how to proceed. Victor nodded, understanding. Of course, but Maggie, be careful. Someone desperate enough to tamper with medical records isn't thinking rationally. I'm concerned about your safety. That's why you arranged for Lucia to stay. Partly, yes. She's not just a health aide. She's a retired nurse with experience in elder protection services. She knows what to watch for. The precautions were necessary but surreal. Protection from my own son, in my own home. Thank you, Victor, for everything. After he left, I sat by the window watching the play of light through the leaves of the Japanese maple, trying to reconcile the son I thought I knew with the man who would sell my home from under me while I recovered from heart surgery. I'd always prided myself on seeing the best in my students, finding potential even in those who struggled. Had that optimism blinded me to the changes in Andrew? The doorbell rang, startling me from my thoughts. Through the bay window, I saw Natalie's sleek, European sedan in the driveway. Lucia moved to answer the door, giving me a questioning glance. "It's my daughter," I assured her. "It's fine." Natalie entered with her usual brisk efficiency, carrying a small gift bag and a forced smile. "Mom, You're home. You look—" She hesitated, clearly searching for a diplomatic description of my post-surgical appearance. "Like someone who's had their chest cracked open?" I suggested dryly. "It's all right, dear. I'm not expecting compliments on my appearance at the moment." She laughed awkwardly, handing me the gift bag. "Just a few things I thought might help. Lavender bath salts for when you're cleared for proper bathing, some hand cream, those British biscuits you like." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by the small thoughtfulness. "That's very kind." Natalie glanced at Lucia, who had retreated to the dining room but remained within sight. "Is that your nurse?" "Home health aide," I corrected. "She'll be staying for the week." "Oh." She seemed disconcerted by this information. "Andrew mentioned you might be going to Sunset for recovery. I thought that was the plan." "Andrew's plan, perhaps. Not mine." Natalie shifted uncomfortably, perching on the edge of the sofa. "He's just concerned about you being alone, Mom. We all are." Her gaze swept the living room, lingering on the archway to the foyer with its grand staircase. "This house has so many hazards for someone recovering from surgery." "Natalie," I said quietly, "let's be honest with each other. This isn't about stairs or hazards. It's about the property value, isn't it?" Her expression flickered between surprise and guilt. "Andrew told you about Riverside Development's interest?" "Not exactly," I replied carefully. "But I've suspected for some time that his concern about my living situation had more to do with the real estate market than my well-being." Natalie had the grace to look ashamed. "It's not just that, Mom. We are worried about you. But yes, Andrew is in a difficult position with the Riverfront Plaza project. He needs capital urgently. So urgently that he filed a fraudulent power of attorney and discussed selling my home while I was still hospitalized." Her eyes widened in genuine shock. "He did what?" Either she was an excellent actress, or Andrew had kept certain details of his plan from his sister. I was inclined to believe the latter. Natalie had always been more straightforward than her brother, less comfortable with deception. "You didn't know," I said. Not a question, but a confirmation. "No, She stood, abruptly pacing to the window and back. "He told me he was looking into assisted living options for after your recovery. He never mentioned anything about power of attorney or selling the house immediately." I watched her carefully, noting the signs of genuine distress. "What else? Did he tell you, Natalie? About my condition? About the hospital stay?" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "He said you were experiencing some confusion after the surgery, that the doctors were concerned about your ability to live independently, that you needed supervision. And you believed him without speaking to me or my doctors directly." It wasn't an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. Still, she flinched, as if I'd struck her. "I should have visited sooner," she admitted. "The product launch was hectic, but that's no excuse. I should have been there." The admission surprised me. Natalie rarely acknowledged her shortcomings so directly. "Yes, you should have," I agreed quietly. "All of you should have been there. But what concerns me more is what's happening now. Andrew isn't just encouraging me to consider senior living. He's actively taking steps to control my assets without my knowledge or consent." Natalie sank back onto the sofa, her professional composure crumbling. "I knew the Riverfront project was in trouble. He asked if I could liquidate some investments to help, but I didn't realize." She looked up suddenly. "Mom, has anything strange happened? Besides the power of attorney thing?" I considered how much to reveal. Natalie seemed genuinely shocked by Andrew's actions, but she was still his sister, still potentially his ally rather than mine. "There was an incident at the hospital," I said carefully. "Someone remotely accessed my medical records and altered my medication orders. The hospital is investigating." Her face paled. "You think Andrew was responsible?" "I don't know, but the timing is suspicious, especially given his subsequent claims about my cognitive status. Natalie stood again, visibly agitated. I can't believe he would. She stopped, collecting herself. What are you going to do? I haven't decided yet, but I want you to understand something, Natalie. I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. My home is not for sale, and any further attempts to manipulate my living situation or my assets will have serious consequences. She nodded slowly. I understand. She hesitated, then added, What can I do? To help, I mean. The tentative offer caught me off guard. You believe me? About Andrew's actions? I don't want to, she admitted. But yes, I do. The Andrew I've seen these past few months isn't the brother I've known all my life. He's been stressed, secretive, increasingly desperate about the riverfront project. I chalked it up to normal business pressure, but maybe it's more than that. For the first time since my hospitalization, I felt a glimmer of hope regarding my children. Not that Andrew would suddenly transform back into the son I remembered, but that perhaps Natalie wasn't as distant or disinterested as I'd feared. I appreciate that, I said genuinely. For now, the most helpful thing would be information. Anything you know about Andrew's financial situation, his plans regarding my property, or unusual behavior. I can do that, she agreed, reaching for her purse. I should go. I have a conference call at 3. But Mom? She met my gaze directly. I'm sorry for not being there at the hospital, for not questioning Andrew's version of events. It won't happen again. After she left, I sat in the quiet of my living room, processing the conversation. Natalie's reaction suggested she hadn't been party to Andrew's more extreme actions, a small comfort amidst the larger betrayal. But more significant was her willingness to side with me once presented with evidence of his deception. Lucia brought me a cup of tea and my afternoon medication, her presence a reminder of the surreal precautions now necessary in my own home. As I sipped the tea, gazing out at my beloved garden, I considered my options. The partnership agreement remained my strongest leverage, a revelation I needed to time carefully for maximum effect. Andrew believed he held all the power in our relationship, the confident adult son managing his elderly mother's affairs. He had forgotten, or perhaps never fully understood, that the business empire he'd built rested on a foundation Edward and I had provided, with conditions he'd never fully satisfied. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Checking in. How was the trip home? We'll stop by tonight to discuss next steps. Next steps. As if my life were a project he was managing, a transaction to be completed. I typed a response, careful to maintain the pretense of normalcy. Settled in comfortably. Lucia is very helpful. See you this evening. Setting the phone aside, I turned my attention to the Japanese meditation garden visible through the side windows. The cherry tree Edward and I had planted on our 30th anniversary was in full bloom, its delicate pink flowers drifting in the slight breeze. Soon those blossoms would fall, making way for summer leaves and eventually autumn fruit, the natural progression of seasons that had continued regardless of human drama. Whatever confrontation awaited with Andrew, I would face it with the same resilience that had carried me through widowhood, retirement, and now heart surgery. He had forgotten one crucial truth in his calculations. I wasn't just his mother, AI, sentimental obstacle to his financial salvation. I was Maggie Cooper, who had built a music academy from nothing, who had raised 3 children while teaching countless others, who had faced the loss of her beloved husband and continued to find purpose and beauty in life. And I still owned controlling interest in his business. The realization brought not vindictive satisfaction, but a calm resolve. When Andrew arrived that evening, he would find not the compliant, confused elderly mother he expected, but a woman prepared to protect what was hers, her home, her independence, and ultimately her dignity. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, its familiar tone resonating through my home like a steadying heartbeat. I had changed into comfortable clothes, loose linen pants and a button-up cardigan that wouldn't irritate my healing incision, and was sitting in the kitchen with Lucia, who was preparing a light dinner of poached salmon and steamed vegetables. "You have beautiful kitchen," she commented, moving with practiced efficiency. "Very organized." "Thank you," I replied, watching her work from my seat at the breakfast nook. "My husband and I renovated it about 15 years ago. Edward was the real cook in the family. He designed the layout." She smiled, a warm expression that softened her professional demeanor. "He had good taste, everything in right place." The doorbell rang, the sound sending an unexpected jolt of anxiety through me. Andrew. Despite the comfort of being home, despite Lucia's reassuring presence and the legal precautions Victor and Jessica had put in place, I wasn't prepared for this confrontation. "I'll get it," Lucia said, setting down the kitchen knife and wiping her hands on a towel. "You stay comfortable." I nodded, grateful for her protective instinct, but determined not to appear weak or vulnerable. "Please show him to the living room. I'll join you there." As Lucia went to answer the door, I took a deep breath, steadying myself. I could hear Andrew's voice in the foyer, confident, charming, the tone he used for business associates and casual acquaintances. He was performing, I realized, playing the role of dutiful son for Lucia's benefit. I made my way slowly to the living room, one hand trailing along the wall for support. The incision across my sternum pulled uncomfortably with certain movements, a physical reminder of my vulnerability that I was determined not to show. Andrew was standing by the fireplace when I entered, examining the family photographs arranged on the mantel. He turned at my approach, his expression shifting into a carefully constructed mask of filial concern. "Mom, how are you feeling? The trip home wasn't too taxing, I hope." He moved as if to embrace me, but I settled into my armchair before he could reach me, forcing him to adjust his approach. "I'm managing well, thank you," I replied evenly. "Dr. Chen is pleased with my progress." He glanced toward the kitchen where Lucia could be heard preparing dinner. "I see you have help. That's good. Though I still think sunset would have been the better option for your immediate recovery. This is my home, Andrew. It's where I'm most comfortable." I gestured to the chair across from me. "Please sit. How was your emergency investor meeting?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Perhaps at my directness, or perhaps that I'd remembered his excuse for not picking me up from the hospital. "Productive," he said after a momentary hesitation. "We're making progress on resolving the Riverfront Plaza issues." "What sort of issues?" He waved a dismissive hand. "Just regulatory red tape. Nothing for you to worry about." "I see." I studied him carefully, the slight tightness around his eyes, the way his fingers drummed briefly against the arm of the chair before he consciously stilled them. Signs of stress I recognized from his childhood, when he would try to conceal disappointment or anxiety. Victor Harper stopped by earlier. He's helping me update some legal documents in light of my health situation. Andrew's expression remained carefully neutral, but his posture stiffened slightly. "That's probably wise. Though you could have asked me to help with that. I work with excellent attorneys every day. I prefer to keep my personal and financial matters with Victor. He's been our family attorney for decades." I paused, watching him carefully. He mentioned something concerning Andrew. Apparently, someone filed for power of attorney over my affairs while I was hospitalized. Would you know anything about that? Direct confrontation had never been my preferred approach with my children. I had always believed in gentle guidance, in allowing them space to admit mistakes and make amends. But the stakes were too high now for such niceties. The practiced smile slipped momentarily before he recovered. Yes, I was going to mention that. It was a precautionary measure, Mom. You were undergoing major surgery with significant risks. I wanted to ensure someone could manage your affairs if complications arose, without discussing it with me first. You were medically compromised, he countered smoothly. The doctors expressed concern about your decision-making capacity immediately post-surgery. Another fabrication. Dr. Chen had never indicated any concerns about my cognitive function. Which doctors, specifically? I asked, keeping my voice even. Because Dr. Chen has consistently documented my mental clarity throughout my recovery. Andrew's confidence wavered visibly. I don't recall the specific physician, one of the consulting specialists. How strange, because the hospital has no record of any such consultation or concern in my chart. His expression hardened slightly, the mask of concerned son slipping to reveal something colder beneath. Mom, what exactly are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Andrew. I'm stating facts. You filed for power of attorney without my knowledge while I was incapacitated. You've been pressuring me to move to assisted living despite my clear preference to remain in my home. And most concerning, someone attempted to alter my medication in a way that would have caused symptoms mimicking cognitive impairment. He stood abruptly, color draining from his face. That's an outrageous accusation. You think I would... He stopped, visibly struggling to control his reaction. This is exactly what I was worried about. Paranoia is a common side effect of cardiac, medication, and post-surgical stress. Is it paranoia when there's documented evidence? I asked quietly. The hospital security team has tracked the unauthorized access to my medical records. They're conducting a formal investigation. Watching my son pace the living room, I felt a profound sadness beneath my determination. This man, this stranger, wearing my son's face, had calculated that my home was worth more to him than my well-being, my independence, my dignity. What desperate circumstances had driven him to such a betrayal? And had the capacity for such callousness always been within him, merely waiting for sufficient temptation to emerge? I don't know what you think you know, he said finally, his voice tight with controlled anger. But you're making serious allegations based on hospital errors and misunderstandings. Victor has filed an injunction against the power of attorney. You submitted. I continued calmly. The notarization is suspect, Andrew. Did you forge my signature? He paled further, confirming my suspicion without words. Mom, you're not thinking clearly. You've been through a traumatic medical event. Stop. I raised a hand, surprising myself with the authority in my gesture. Andrew fell silent immediately, a reflexive response to parental command that apparently still lingered. I am thinking with perfect clarity. What I'm struggling to understand is how my son, the child I raised, educated, supported in every endeavor, could attempt to sell my home without my consent while I recovered from heart surgery. The direct accusation landed like a physical blow. Andrew froze, his expression shifting from defensive anger to shocked realization that I knew far more than he had anticipated. Who told you that? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? Is it true? He sank back, into the chair, the calculated facade crumbling entirely. It wasn't like that, he said, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it in a gesture so reminiscent of his teenage self that it sparked an unwelcome pang of maternal recognition. The Riverfront Plaza project is in trouble. Serious trouble. The environmental impact assessment revealed contamination issues we didn't anticipate. The remediation costs will be astronomical. And my property would solve this problem how, exactly? Riverside Development Partners has been trying to assemble parcels in your neighborhood for a luxury condominium project. Your lot is key to their master plan because of the corner location and lot depth. They've offered significantly above market value. So you took it upon yourself to negotiate the sale of my home without my knowledge or consent. It wasn't a question. Andrew leaned forward, desperation evident in his expression. Mom, You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The riverfront project isn't just another development. It's the cornerstone of the company's expansion strategy. If it fails, everything I've built could collapse. Investors are threatening to pull out, loans are coming due. Personal guarantees mean I could lose everything: the company, my home, the children's college funds. For the first time since this confrontation began, I saw genuine fear in my son's eyes. Not calculation, not manipulation, but raw fear. It didn't excuse his actions, but it helped me understand them. Andrew had always defined himself through achievement, measuring his worth by external success. The prospect of failure, public, catastrophic failure, would be unbearable to him. And that justifies attempting to manipulate my medication, forging legal documents, selling my home from under me? I asked, my voice gentler but still firm. He flinched. I didn't touch your medication. I would never do that. The denial was swift and seemed genuine, but a lifetime of teaching piano had made me adept at detecting when students were being less than truthful about their practice habits. There was something in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty perhaps, that gave me pause. But you know who did, I said, realization dawning. Don't you? Andrew's gaze dropped to his hands. Kathy might have suggested something to one of her former colleagues, a consultant at the hospital, just to help you rest more comfortably during recovery. The admission, however reluctant, sent a chill through me. My daughter-in-law had deliberately interfered with my medical care, with my son's knowledge, if not his direct participation. Andrew, look at me. I waited until he raised his eyes to mine. What you and Kathy have done isn't just unethical, it's potentially criminal. Medication tampering, fraud, financial exploitation of an elder, these are serious offenses with severe consequences. Fear gave way to alarm in his expression. Mom, please. I was desperate. The riverfront project means everything. More than your relationship with me? More than your integrity? He had no answer for that, his silence more damning than any explanation could have been. Here's what's going to happen, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice when my heart felt anything but steady. You are going to leave my home now. You will cease all attempts to control my living situation or financial affairs. You will direct Kathy to provide a full statement to the hospital regarding her role in the medication incident. And if I refuse? A flash of the old Andrew, defiant, calculating, resurfaced briefly. Then tomorrow morning, I will contact the police, file formal charges, and immediately exercise my rights as a 42% owner of Cooper Development Group. The blood drained from his face so completely I momentarily feared he might faint. What did you say? You seem to have forgotten that your father and I provided the seed capital for your business. The partnership agreement gives me 42% ownership and approval rights for all major financial decisions and asset dispositions. That was 20 years ago, he protested weakly. I've bought out most of your interest. Most, but not all. The agreement remains in full force. I've confirmed this with Victor. Andrew stared at me as if seeing me for the first time, not as his elderly mother to be managed, but as a formidable adversary with unexpected leverage. You would destroy my company? Your own son's livelihood? The question held equal parts, disbelief and accusation. I would protect myself from a son who has demonstrated he values property over my well-being, I corrected gently. The choice of how this proceeds is yours, Andrew. But understand this, I will not be moved from my home against my will. I will not surrender my independence or my assets because of your financial miscalculations. The grandfather clock chimed, the half hour, its steady tone punctuating the tense silence that had fallen between us. In the kitchen, Lucia moved quietly, her presence a reassuring reminder that I was not alone in this confrontation. Andrew stood slowly, his expression unreadable. I need time to think. Take all the time you need, I replied evenly. But don't mistake my compassion for weakness. I've consulted with both Victor and Jessica Garcia, a specialist in elder law. They're prepared to take immediate legal action if necessary. He nodded stiffly, moving toward the entryway. At the threshold of the living room, he paused, turning back with an expression that struck me as genuinely conflicted. For what it's worth, I never intended for things to go this far, he said quietly. It started as a simple business solution. Your house has far more value as developable land than as a single-family residence. The market timing was perfect. It made financial sense. Not everything of value can be measured in dollars, Andrew. I held his gaze steadily. That's a lesson I thought I had taught you long ago. After he left, Lucia returned to the living room, her expression concerned. You okay, Mrs. Cooper? That seemed intense. Yes, I assured her, though in truth I felt drained by the confrontation. Just family business matters. She nodded, not pressing for details but clearly ready to intervene if needed. Dinner is ready whenever you feel up to eating. Thank you, Lucia. I think I'll rest for a few minutes first. Alone in the quiet living room, I gazed at the family photographs on the mantel. Andrew's graduation from business school, Natalie's wedding, Peter on his sailboat. Moments captured in time when we had still functioned as a family, when the bonds of affection and shared history had seemed unbreakable. Had I truly not seen the changes in Andrew? Or had I seen but chosen to ignore them, making excuses for his increasing focus on material success, his gradual emotional withdrawal? As a mother, I had always believed in seeing the best in my children. Perhaps that instinct had blinded me to troubling realities until crisis forced me to confront them. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. Checking in. How are you feeling after your first day home? And did Andrew stop by as planned? I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about the confrontation. While Natalie had seemed genuinely shocked by Andrew's actions earlier today, family loyalties were complex. Siblings often closed ranks in crisis, even when one was clearly in the wrong. Finally, I typed, resting comfortably. Yes, Andrew visited. We had a difficult but necessary conversation about recent events. I'll tell you more when we speak next. Her response came quickly. Difficult how? Are you okay? Should I come over? The offer of immediate support surprised me. I'm fine, I replied. Lucia is here, but I would appreciate a visit tomorrow if you have time. I'll come by after lunch. Rest well, Mom. Setting the phone aside, I closed my eyes briefly, gathering strength for the battles that still lay ahead. Andrew would not surrender easily, not with his entire business empire at stake. The partnership agreement gave me leverage, but using it would mean potentially destroying my son's career, his financial security, his sense of identity. Yet what was the alternative? Allow him to sell my home, force me into an institution I didn't want or need, strip me of my independence and dignity? No, that price was too high, even for a mother's love. Lucia appeared with a tray, setting it carefully on the side table. You should eat something, good for healing. The simple act of care, a meal prepared with attention to my medical needs, served without fuss or expectation, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Here was a practical stranger showing more genuine concern for my well-being than my own son had demonstrated in months. Thank you, I said, blinking back the emotion. It looks wonderful. As I ate the simple but perfectly prepared meal, I gazed out at the meditation garden Edward and I had created together. The cherry tree was silhouetted against the evening sky, its blossoms pale ghosts in the gathering twilight. Beyond it stood the stone lantern we had brought back from a trip to Kyoto, the small reflecting pool where koi fish moved in lazy circles. This garden had been our sanctuary during Edward's illness, the place where we had sat together during his final months, making peace with the inevitable while finding joy in each day that remained to us. How could Andrew not understand what this space meant to me? How could he reduce it to square footage and development potential? After dinner, Lucia helped me prepare for bed, her professional training evident in the way she assisted without infantilizing me, respecting my privacy while ensuring my safety. As she checked my incision and helped me arrange pillows to support my healing chest, I found myself wondering about her life beyond her professional role. "Do you have family nearby, Lucia?" I asked as she organized my evening medications. She smiled, a warm expression that transformed her serious face. "Yes, my daughter and her family live 20 minutes away. 2 grandchildren. Sophia is 7, Miguel is 4. Do you see them often?" "Every Sunday without fail. Family dinner is sacred." She handed me the small paper cup of pills with a glass of water. No excuses accepted, not even from their father, who is a surgeon with a busy schedule. The simple statement held no judgment, yet it pierced me with its implicit contrast to my own children's patterns. How had we drifted so far from the close-knit family Edward and I had worked so hard to create? "That's wonderful," I said sincerely. "Family connections are precious." "Yes." She hesitated, then added gently, "If you don't mind me saying, Mrs. Cooper, your son seemed very intense. Is everything okay between you?" I considered deflecting the question, maintaining the privacy around family matters that had been my habit for decades. But something in Lucia's genuine concern broke through that reserve. "No, it isn't," I admitted quietly. "Andrew is in financial trouble and sees my home as a solution to his problems. He's taken some concerning steps to try controlling my assets." Lucia's expression darkened. "I've seen this before in my work with elder services. Adult children who view parents as resources rather than people. I never thought it would happen in my family," I said, the admission carrying the weight of my disappointment. I believed I had raised children who understood that relationships matter more than things. "Some people forget important lessons. When money is involved," she observed. "But you are a strong woman, Mrs. Cooper. I can tell. And you have people who support you. Your attorney, your neighbor Helen, who called twice today to check on you, your daughter who texted." Her words reminded me that while one relationship had revealed its fragility, others remained intact. Friendships, professional connections, and perhaps even familial bonds with my other children that could be strengthened rather than severed. "Thank you, Lucia, for everything." After she had turned out the lights and retired to the guest room across the hall, I lay in the familiar comfort of my own bed, processing the day's events. The confrontation with Andrew had been painful but necessary, clearing away pretense and forcing harsh realities into the open. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: a meeting with Jessica to formalize legal protections, potential discussions with Natalie about family dynamics, decisions about how aggressively to pursue accountability for the medication tampering incident. But for tonight, I was home. In the house Edward and I had filled with music and laughter and love, surrounded by memories that no developer's check could ever replace. My body was healing from surgical trauma, and though my heart ached with maternal disappointment, it beat with newfound determination. I drifted toward sleep with a strange sense of peace despite the turmoil. Whatever came next, I would face it with the same resilience that had carried me through widowhood. And now, heart surgery. Andrew had underestimated me, seeing only an elderly mother to be managed rather than a woman who had built a successful business, raised 3 children, and survived the loss of her beloved partner. His mistake would prove costly, not in financial terms necessarily, but in the currency of trust and respect that, once diminished, might never be fully restored. Morning arrived with golden light spilling through the east-facing windows and the distant sound of birdsong from the garden. I woke feeling more rested than I had in the hospital, despite the emotional strain of the previous evening. There was comfort in familiar surroundings, in the knowledge that I was fighting not just for a property, but for the life I had chosen. Lucia appeared with a light breakfast and my morning medications, her efficient movements softened by a genuine smile. "You look better today. More color in your face." "I feel better," I acknowledged. Amazing what sleeping in one's own bed can do. "Today's schedule?" she asked, helping me adjust pillows so I could sit more comfortably. "My attorney, Jessica Garcia, is coming at 10 to finalize some legal documents. My daughter Natalie will visit after lunch. Otherwise, I'd like to spend some time in the garden if the weather permits." "The garden is possible, but only for short time," Lucia stipulated, her professional assessment clear. "No gardening, just sitting, and not during hottest part of day." I accepted these limitations without argument, recognizing them as reasonable precautions rather than arbitrary restrictions. This was care, not control, a crucial distinction I wished Andrew could understand. As I ate breakfast, my phone buzzed with a text from an unexpected source. "Peter, my youngest, currently halfway across the world. Mom, just heard from Natalie about your surgery and everything else that's happening. I'm catching a flight home tomorrow. Should arrive Thursday evening. Don't take any drastic steps with Andrew until I'm there. Love you." The message brought mixed emotions. Relief that Peter was coming home, concern about what exactly Natalie had told him, uncertainty about his perspective on the situation with Andrew. The three siblings had always had complicated relationships. Peter and Andrew particularly had clashed over the years, their different values and life approaches creating periodic tension. I texted back, "Safe travels. Looking forward to seeing you. Don't worry about the Andrew situation. It's being handled appropriately." Jessica arrived precisely at 10, her professional demeanor complemented by a warmth that put me at ease. Immediately. She carried a sleek leather portfolio and a determined expression that suggested she was fully prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead. "Good morning, Maggie," she greeted me, settling into the chair across from mine in the living room. "You're looking remarkably well today. Home obviously agrees with you." "It does," I confirmed. "Thank you for coming here rather than requiring me to travel to your office." "Of course." She opened her portfolio, revealing neatly organized documents. "I've prepared several items for your review and signature today. First, a revocation of any existing powers of attorney, including explicit rejection of the document Andrew submitted. I signed where indicated, feeling a sense of reclaimed agency with each signature. Next, a new advanced healthcare directive, naming Victor as your primary medical decision-maker should you become incapacitated, with Helen Parker as secondary. You mentioned not wanting to name either of your other children at this point. Not yet, I confirmed. Until I understand their positions regarding Andrew's actions, I'm hesitant to give them legal authority over my care. Jessica nodded, understanding. That's entirely reasonable under the circumstances. We can always amend these documents as the situation evolves. She continued through the paperwork methodically. A temporary restraining order preventing Andrew from accessing my medical information or making decisions regarding my property. Documentation for the hospital's investigation of the medication, tampering incident, and preliminary paperwork for updating my will. Now, regarding the partnership agreement, she said, her tone shifting to reflect the seriousness of this particular matter. Victor and I have reviewed it thoroughly. It's extraordinarily solid, Maggie. The language gives you significant leverage in Cooper Development Group's operations. Enough to block the Riverfront Plaza project if necessary. Absolutely. Any financial commitment exceeding $2 million requires approval from partners holding at least 25% ownership. Your 42% means Andrew cannot proceed without your consent. I absorbed this confirmation, feeling no triumph but rather a somber recognition of the power I held. Power that could either save my son from his financial miscalculations or accelerate his company's collapse. What do you recommend? I asked, trusting her professional judgment. Jessica considered the question carefully. From a purely legal perspective, you have multiple options. You could exercise your authority immediately, demanding full financial disclosure and potentially blocking further expenditure on the troubled project. That would be the most aggressive approach. And the alternatives? You could use the partnership agreement as leverage to secure legally binding commitments from Andrew regarding your property and independence. Essentially, a negotiated resolution that protects your interests while potentially allowing him a path forward with his business. The second option appealed to the mother in me, the part that, despite everything, couldn't completely abandon. Hope for reconciliation or at least resolution that wouldn't destroy Andrew's career entirely. There would need to be accountability, I said slowly. For the medication tampering, the fraudulent power of attorney, the attempted property sale. I can't simply pretend those things didn't happen. Absolutely, Jessica agreed firmly. Any negotiated resolution would require full acknowledgement of those actions and concrete steps to ensure nothing similar ever occurs again. I'm not suggesting forgiveness without accountability. I'll need time to consider the options, I said finally, and I'd like to speak with Natalie and Peter before making any final decisions. Of course, there's no rush on this aspect. The restraining order and healthcare directive provide immediate protection. Take whatever time you need to determine the right path forward with the partnership agreement. As Jessica gathered her documents, she added, "For what it's worth, Maggie, I've handled many elder exploitation cases in my career. The fact that you're approaching this with such thoughtfulness and restraint speaks volumes about your character. Many people in your position would immediately pursue the most punitive options available." Her words provided unexpected comfort, professional validation that my hesitation to completely sever ties with Andrew came from strength rather than weakness. After Jessica left, I spent a few quiet moments in the meditation garden, seated on the stone bench beneath the cherry tree. The physical pain of my healing incision seemed insignificant compared to the ache of maternal disappointment and betrayal. Yet even amid that pain, I found myself seeking understanding rather than vengeance, trying to comprehend how the ambitious but ethical young man I had raised had transformed into someone capable of such calculated betrayal. The garden offered no easy answers, but its tranquility provided space for reflection without judgment. As I watched a butterfly light briefly on a nearby flower before continuing its journey, I considered how much of life consisted of similar moments, temporary landings, necessary pauses before moving forward. My confrontation with Andrew marked such a moment, a painful but essential pause before determining what our relationship might become in the aftermath of broken trust. The partnership agreement gave me tangible power in the situation, but how I chose to use that power would define not just Andrew's future, but my own as well. Natalie arrived just after 2 o'clock, her usual professional polish softened by an uncharacteristic hesitancy as she crossed the threshold into my home. She carried a canvas tote bag filled with what appeared to be books and magazines, a gesture of thoughtfulness that stood in stark contrast to Andrew's calculated approach the evening before. "Mom," she said, embracing me with careful gentleness, mindful of my healing incision, "you look so much better than at the hospital." "Amazing what sleeping in your own bed can do," I replied, leading her into the sunroom at the back of the house where I'd been resting. The afternoon light created dappled patterns through the maple leaves outside, casting a peaceful glow across the wicker furniture Edward and I had selected 2 decades earlier. Lucia appeared briefly to bring tea and check if I needed anything before retreating to give us privacy. As she placed the tray on the small table between our chairs, Natalie watched her with curious assessment. "The home health aide seems attentive," she observed after Lucia had left. "She's excellent," I confirmed, pouring tea into delicate porcelain. Cups, part of a set Edward's mother had brought from England decades ago. "And not just medically, she's become a comforting presence." Natalie nodded, accepting the cup I offered. "I'm glad you have proper support. I should have arranged it myself instead of assuming Andrew had everything handled?" I finished gently when she trailed off. She met my gaze directly, something shifting in her expression. Yes. That was a mistake. One of many I've made recently. The admission surprised me. Natalie had always been the most self-assured of my children, reluctant to acknowledge missteps or uncertainties. Her marketing career had reinforced this tendency toward careful image management, presenting polished competence to the world regardless of inner doubts. After you left yesterday, I called Andrew, she continued, setting her teacup down with deliberate care. I asked him directly about the power of attorney, about the medication incident, about his plans for your house. And? He evaded at first, tried to dismiss my concerns, said you were confused and making accusations based on misunderstandings. She shook her head, apparent disgust tightening her features. When I pressed him, he admitted to filing the power of attorney, but insisted it was just a precautionary measure. He denied any knowledge of the medication tampering, but couldn't explain why he'd told me doctors had concerns about your cognitive function, when no such concerns were documented. Did he mention Kathy's involvement? Natalie's eyebrows rose, sharply. Kathy, what does she have to do with this? According to Andrew, she suggested changes to my medication to a former pharmaceutical colleague, now consulting at the hospital, ostensibly to help me rest more comfortably during recovery. My God! Natalie stared at me, genuine shock evident in her expression. That could be criminal. Yes, I agreed simply. It could be. She stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the meditation garden, her back to me as she processed this information. I allowed her the moment, understanding that her worldview was being fundamentally challenged. The brother she had known all her life, the sister-in-law she had welcomed into the family, both potentially involved in something far darker than mere financial pressure or misguided concern. I've spent the last 24 hours going through Cooper Development's publicly available financial records, she said finally, still facing the garden. The Riverfront Plaza project is a disaster, Mom. Environmental remediation costs, permit, delays, investor withdrawals. Andrew has leveraged everything on its success. This confirmed what Victor's investigation had already revealed, but hearing it from Natalie carried different significance. She had always been protective of Andrew, despite their occasional conflicts, more willing to defend his choices than critique them. He told me as much yesterday, I said. He views my property as the solution to his financial crisis. Natalie turned back to face me, her expression troubled. But why not just ask for your help directly? Why the elaborate deception, the pressure, tactics, the medication tampering? She struggled with the last words, clearly still processing their implications. I believe he assumed I would refuse, that I would prioritize staying in my home over helping him salvage his business. And he was correct in that assessment. I gestured to the room around us, to the garden beyond. This isn't just property, to me, Natalie. It's the life your father and I built together. It's 42 years of memories, of safety, of independence. I understand that now, she said quietly, returning to her seat. I didn't fully appreciate it before. When Andrew first mentioned the idea of you selling and moving to Sunset, it seemed logical, a practical solution for an aging parent. I didn't consider what this house truly means to you. Her acknowledgement warmed something in me that had grown cold during Andrew's betrayal. Not forgiveness exactly, but appreciation for her willingness to see beyond her initial assumptions. What will you do now? She asked, watching me with evident concern. About Andrew? About the partnership agreement? About all of it? I considered the question carefully, appreciating that she didn't try to influence my decision in either direction. I'm still determining the best path forward. Peter is flying in tomorrow. I'd like to hear his perspective before making any final decisions. Peter's coming home? Genuine surprise colored her voice. He hasn't been back in 2 years? Nearly 3, I corrected. Not since that brief visit when his boat needed repairs in San Francisco. Natalie shook her head slightly. Well, that shows how serious this situation is, if it's pulling Peter back from whatever exotic location he's been exploring. There was a hint of the old sibling dynamic in her tone, the middle child's mild exasperation with her younger brother's freedom from conventional responsibilities. But beneath it lay genuine relief that family connections were being reactivated, even under difficult circumstances. "I'd like to be here when he arrives," she said after a moment. "If that's okay with you." "I'd appreciate that," I replied. Honestly, the prospect of having 2 of my 3 children present, not to pressure or manipulate me, but to offer support, eased something that had been tight in my chest since awakening in the hospital alone. Natalie reached into the tote bag she had brought, withdrawing several books and magazines. "I thought these might help pass the time during your recovery. The new biography of that pianist you admire, a few gardening journals with articles on Japanese maples and..." She hesitated before pulling out a leather-bound notebook. "This might seem odd, but I thought perhaps you might want to document everything that's happening. For clarity, for legal purposes if needed, or just for yourself." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, so different from Andrew's brochures for Sunset Senior Living, brought unexpected emotion to my throat. "Thank you," I managed, taking the notebook and running my fingers over its supple cover. "That's very considerate." We spent the next hour in conversation more genuine than any we'd shared in years. Natalie spoke of her recent promotion, the challenges of managing a team twice the size of her previous one, her growing disillusionment with corporate marketing despite her success within it. I shared stories of her father she hadn't heard before, how he had practiced piano alongside me during our early dating years, despite his limited musical ability, determined to understand my passion, how he had secretly taken Japanese lessons before our anniversary trip to Kyoto. When she finally prepared to leave, promising to return the following evening when Peter was expected to arrive, she paused at the door with an expression of unusual vulnerability. "I'm sorry, Mom," she said, quietly, "for not being there during your surgery, for accepting Andrew's version of events without question, for taking you for granted." "Thank you," I replied simply, accepting the apology without diminishing its importance with easy forgiveness. Some breaches of trust required more than words to heal fully. She nodded, understanding the measured response. "I'll see you tomorrow. Call if you need anything before then." After she left, I settled in the meditation garden with the leather journal she had given me, recording the day's conversation while it remained fresh in my mind. The simple act of documenting events brought clarity, separating emotional reactions from factual occurrences, tracking the evolution of understanding as more information came to light. Lucia brought me a light early dinner in the garden, her quiet presence respectful of my contemplation. "Your daughter seems nice," she observed as she arranged the meal on the small table beside my bench. "Different from Son." "Yes," I agreed, struck by the accuracy of her simple assessment. "They've always had very different approaches to life." "And the other one coming tomorrow? What is he like?" I considered how to describe Peter to someone who had never met him. Free-spirited, restless, passionate about experiences rather than possessions or status. I smiled slightly, remembering his last visit. "He's the least conventional of my children, but in some ways, the most emotionally honest." Lucia nodded, sagely. "Good to have different kinds of children, like different instruments in orchestra. Each has own sound, own purpose." The metaphor resonated deeply with me, echoing thoughts I'd had many times while watching my students perform in recitals. Some excelled at technical precision, others at emotional expression. The most compelling performances integrated both. "You're very wise, Lucia," I observed. "Have you worked with many families in situations like mine?" A shadow crossed her face. "Too many. Elder services showed me sad things. Children who see parents as inconvenience or as, how you say, piggy bank. But you still believe in family? I noted, recalling her mention of sacred Sunday dinners with her daughter and grandchildren. I believe in respect, she corrected gently. Family is just word without respect. Some people who share blood are strangers in heart. Some people who share no blood are closest family. Her simple wisdom echoed in my mind throughout the evening as I prepared for bed. The boundaries of family, who truly deserved that designation, beyond mere biological connection, had been forcibly redrawn by recent events. Andrew's betrayal had revealed the hollowness of familial obligation without genuine care. Natalie's tentative steps toward accountability suggested the possibility of rebuilding authentic connection. And Peter's immediate decision to return home indicated ties that, while stretched by distance, remained fundamentally intact. Morning brought a text from Victor. Hospital security has completed initial investigation. Evidence points to unauthorized access of your records using credentials from a consulting physician who previously worked with Kathy. They're preparing formal report. How do you want to proceed? The confirmation of Andrew and Kathy's involvement in medication tampering should have shocked me, but I had moved beyond shock to a more pragmatic assessment of necessary responses. Let me discuss with Peter when he arrives, I replied. I'll make decisions about legal action after family consultation. Victor's response was immediate. Understood. Jessica and I are ready to move forward with whatever approach you choose. The day passed quietly, with Helen Parker stopping by mid-morning to bring fresh flowers from her garden and check on my recovery. At 72, Helen retained the energetic enthusiasm for horticulture that had first connected us as neighbors 15 years earlier, when Edward was still alive and the meditation garden was just beginning to take shape under our combined care. The azaleas are magnificent this year, she commented, settling comfortably into a chair in the sunroom. And I've been keeping an eye on your Japanese maple. It's healthier than mine despite your absence. Must be all the careful pruning you did before? She trailed off, clearly editing herself to avoid mentioning my hospitalization directly. Before my heart decided to remind me of my mortality? I finished with a small smile. It's all right, Helen. We can speak plainly about it. She relaxed visibly. Oh, good. I've never been one for tiptoeing around difficult subjects, but Caroline suggested I should be careful not to tax you with worries. Caroline is very kind, but I'm not made of glass, either physically or emotionally. Helen nodded emphatically. That's what I told her. Maggie Cooper survived Edward's death, retirement, and raising 3 headstrong children. A little heart surgery isn't going to diminish her spirit. Her matter-of-fact confidence in my resilience was precisely the tonic I needed after days of navigating Andrew's manipulation and concerns about my capabilities. Speaking of headstrong, children, Helen continued, lowering her voice slightly despite the fact that we were alone in the room. Caroline mentioned there's been some difficulty with Andrew? Something about your house? I hesitated, uncertain how much to share. While Helen was a trusted friend, the situation with Andrew involved potentially criminal behavior that I was still processing how to address. There have been some disagreements about my living arrangements, I said carefully. Andrew feels I would be better off in assisted living after my surgery. Helen's eyes narrowed skeptically. And would this have anything to do with Riverside? Development eyeing properties in our neighborhood? Thomas from the Community Association mentioned they've been making offers significantly above market value for corner lots. The specific knowledge surprised me. You know about that? Maggie, I may be retired, but I'm not oblivious. 3 properties on Cedar Street have sold in the past 6 months, all to shell companies that trace back to Riverside. They're assembling parcels for that luxury condominium complex the city council approved despite community objections. I had underestimated Helen's awareness of local development politics, a reminder not to make assumptions about anyone's knowledge or capabilities based on age or circumstance. something I wished Andrew had considered before assuming I would quietly comply with his plans for my property. Yes, I acknowledged. Andrew has connections with Riverside Development. They're interested in my property specifically because of its position and lot depth. Helen's expression darkened. That's concerning, especially given his sudden interest in moving you elsewhere. She leaned forward, her gardener's hands, still strong despite arthritis, clasping mine firmly. Maggie, you know you have support in this community, right? Whatever you decide about your living situation should be your choice based on your needs and wishes, not external pressures. Thank you, Helen. That means a great deal to me. After she left, I spent time with the journal Natalie had given me, documenting Helen's revelations about Riverside Development's pattern of acquisitions in the neighborhood. The information provided additional context for Andrew's urgency. If Riverside was actively assembling parcels, a holdout property could derail their entire project timeline and financing structure. The afternoon brought increasing anticipation of Peter's arrival. Natalie texted that she had confirmed his flight was on time and she would pick him up from the airport, bringing him directly to the house. Lucia helped me prepare a simple dinner that could be served whenever they arrived, understanding the significance of this family reunion under such strained circumstances. Your son who sails boats, she commented as she chopped vegetables for a salad. He travels all over world? Yes, I confirmed. The past few years he's been primarily in Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. Before that, it was the Mediterranean and Caribbean. But he comes home now because you need him, she observed. This is good sign. I hope so, I agreed, though uncertainty lingered. Peter and Andrew had always had a complicated relationship, philosophical differences about life priorities that occasionally erupted into more direct conflict. Peter's return now, specifically in response to Andrew's actions, could potentially escalate tensions rather than help resolve them. At 7:30, headlights swept across the front windows as a car pulled into the driveway. Moments later, the doorbell rang, and Lucia went to answer it while I remained in the living room, suddenly nervous about seeing my youngest child after nearly 3 years of only digital communication. Peter entered first, his tall frame filling the doorway, bronze skin and sun-bleached hair testament to his outdoor lifestyle. Behind him, Natalie appeared, carrying his worn duffel bag with an expression that mixed relief and lingering concern. "Mom," Peter said simply, crossing the room in 3 long strides to embrace me carefully. He smelled of airport and faintly of sea salt, as if the ocean clung to him regardless of his distance from it. "You should have called me about the surgery. You were island hopping in Indonesia," I reminded him gently. "Not exactly accessible for emergency notifications." He pulled back, studying me with the direct gaze that had always been his hallmark. At 38, lines had formed at the corners of his eyes from years squinting into sun-dazzled waters, but the clear blue of his irises, so like Edward's, remained unchanged. "I would have come," he stated firmly. "You know that, right?" "I do now," I acknowledged, gesturing for him and Natalie to sit. "And I'm grateful you're here." Natalie arranged Peter's bag near the stairs before joining us, her earlier professional polish now softened into casual clothes and minimal makeup. The contrast between my children was striking. Peter in worn jeans and a faded t-shirt that had seen better days, relaxed in his physical presence despite the tension of the situation. Natalie still containing an essential formality, even in her attempt at casual comfort. "Natalie's filled me in on the basics," Peter said, dispensing with preamble in his characteristic way. "Andrew tried to sell your house while you were hospitalized, potentially tampered with your medication, and forged power of attorney documents. Am I missing anything?" His blunt summary laid bare the situation with none of the hedging or justification Andrew would have employed. It was both refreshing and slightly jarring after days of careful conversations and implied meanings. "That covers the primary concerns," I confirmed, "though there are nuances to consider," Such as? Andrew is in serious financial trouble with the Riverfront Plaza project. He sees my property as his salvation, not just financially convenient, but potentially necessary to avoid bankruptcy and personal financial ruin. Peter's expression hardened. That explains his actions, but doesn't excuse them. Defrauding your own mother is still fraud, regardless of motive. I agree, I said carefully. But I'm struggling with how to respond in a way that protects me, without unnecessarily destroying him. Natalie leaned forward, her marketing executive's instinct for finding balanced solutions evident in her expression. The partnership agreement gives you leverage, Mom. You could use it to force concessions rather than simply punishing him. Peter looked between us, confusion evident. Partnership agreement? What partnership agreement? I realized that Peter had been so young when Cooper Development Group was founded that he might never have known the full details of its establishment. When Andrew started his company 20 years ago, your father and I provided the initial capital in exchange for controlling interest. I still own 42% of the business and have approval rights for major financial decisions. Peter's eyes widened, then a slow smile spread across his face. Not malicious, but appreciative of the unexpected twist. So while Andrew was trying to sell your house out from under you, I technically owned a controlling stake in his business, I confirmed. Though I've been a silent partner for so long, he seems to have forgotten that fact. That's... Peter shook his head in amazement. That's perfect. Poetic justice. Natalie shot him a warning look. This isn't about revenge, Peter. It's about finding a resolution that protects Mom while allowing for possible reconciliation. Reconciliation? Peter's tone sharpened. He tried to drug her into appearing incompetent, Natalie. He forged legal documents. He was ready to sell her home without her consent. What part of that seems deserving of reconciliation to you? The familiar dynamic between them, Peter's moral absolutism clashing with Natalie's pragmatic diplomacy, might have been comforting in its familiarity if the stakes weren't so high. Peter, I interjected gently, I understand your anger. I've felt it myself. But Andrew is still your brother, still my son. While I can't ignore or excuse what he's done, I'm not ready to completely sever that relationship without exploring alternatives. He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. Okay, I respect that. But I won't sit by and watch him manipulate or pressure you either. I wouldn't expect you to, I assured him. Your presence here is already providing important support and perspective. Lucia appeared discreetly in the doorway. Dinner is ready whenever you want. I can serve or leave you to family privacy. Please join us, I invited, knowing her presence would help moderate what might otherwise become an intensely charged family discussion. You're an important part of my support system now. The simple meal became a council of sorts. Peter, Natalie, Lucia, and me discussing options for addressing the situation with Andrew. Peter advocated for the most direct approach, confronting Andrew immediately with the partnership agreement and evidence of his deception, potentially involving law enforcement regarding the medication tampering. He needs to face real consequences, Peter insisted, his moral clarity unwavering. Otherwise, he'll justify his actions and potentially try something similar in the future. Natalie favored a more measured response, using the partnership agreement as leverage to secure legally binding commitments from Andrew regarding my property and independence, while handling the medication issue separately and potentially privately. Criminal charges would devastate his career permanently, she pointed out. Is that outcome proportionate to the harm intended, especially since the medication change was caught before affecting Mom? Their different approaches reflected their fundamental personalities. Peter seeing the world in terms of principles and justice, Natalie in terms of practical outcomes and damage control. Both perspectives had merit, and both came from genuine concern for my well-being. What do you think, Lucia? I asked, interested in her outside perspective. She considered carefully before answering. In my work with elder services, I see families torn apart by money and property. Sometimes legal action necessary when elder safety at risk. But I also see that court battles leave wounds that never heal, even when justice is served. Her balanced assessment resonated with my own conflicted feelings. The maternal instinct to protect a child, even from his own worst impulses, warred with the fundamental need to protect myself from exploitation and ensure accountability for serious ethical breaches. "I need to speak with Andrew directly," I said finally. "With both of you present, and with full awareness of my legal leverage through the partnership agreement. Not to attack or humiliate him, but to establish clear boundaries and consequences." Peter nodded slowly, accepting this middle path despite his preference for more decisive action. "When?" "Tomorrow," I decided. "I'll call him in the morning and ask him to come by in the afternoon." Natalie appeared relieved at this measured approach, though concern still shadowed her expression. "What about Kathy? Her involvement in the medication issue is particularly troubling." "I'll address that with Andrew first," I replied. "Depending on his response and willingness to take responsibility, we can determine whether hospital administration and potentially law enforcement need to be formally involved." As we finished the meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Peter sharing stories of his recent sailing adventures in the Raja Ampat Islands. Natalie describing a marketing campaign she was particularly proud of that supported environmental conservation efforts. For a brief interlude, it felt almost normal. A family dinner like the ones we'd shared years ago, before grief and distance and separate lives had created such profound division. When Lucia excused herself to prepare my evening medications, Peter moved to the piano that stood in the corner of the living room, the Steinway baby grand that had been the centerpiece of our home for 40 years. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys, producing a gentle cascade of notes. "You still play?" I observed, surprised and touched. Of my 3 children, Peter had shown the most natural musical aptitude, but the least discipline for formal study. "Sometimes," he admitted. "On islands with music programs for local kids. Nothing fancy, just basic lessons. It connects me to places in a different way than sailing alone does." He glanced up with a small smile. All those years of forced practice weren't entirely wasted. The simple admission offered unexpected balm to my spirit, evidence that parental influence remained even when not directly acknowledged, that seeds planted decades ago could bear fruit in surprising ways. As Peter began playing a simple Chopin nocturne, Edward's favorite piece, though I hadn't mentioned that detail, I caught Natalie watching with an expression of soft wonder, perhaps also reconciling the free-spirited brother before her with the complicated family history we shared. The music filled the living room with gentle melancholy, a fitting soundtrack to the bittersweet reality of our family's current state. Fractured but not entirely broken, with possibility for healing alongside the necessary acknowledgement of harm done. Tomorrow would bring confrontation and difficult truths. But tonight, in the presence of 2 children who had chosen to return and support me, I found a measure of peace I hadn't expected to feel again so soon after Andrew's betrayal. The melody Peter played spoke of both sadness and hope, much like the complicated emotion of maternal love that persisted despite disappointment. Not blind or unconditional, but resilient in its capacity to accommodate both clear-eyed assessment and enduring connection. The confrontation with Andrew unfolded with unexpected clarity. When faced with the partnership agreement that gave me controlling interest in his company, his carefully constructed facade crumbled. The man who had tried to sell my home while I recovered from heart surgery now sat before me. Peter and Natalie, stripped of leverage and forced to reckon with consequences. "I never meant for things to go this far," he said, his voice hollow with the realization of his precarious position. "The riverfront project was supposed to secure our future, but when the environmental assessment revealed contamination requiring full remediation, everything started unraveling." "So you saw my home as the solution," I supplied, without considering what it meant to me. "I convinced myself it was practical," he admitted, not meeting my eyes. "That it would benefit everyone." "Except it ignored what I wanted," I pointed out. "What mattered to me." His nod was almost imperceptible. Defeat, replacing the confident businessman who had arrived with polished proposals. I laid out my terms firmly. His resignation as CEO while remaining president under board oversight, including myself and Natalie. A formal acknowledgement of his inappropriate actions, legal documents ensuring my home remained under my control, and Kathy's complete statement about her role in the medication incident. "You're asking me to surrender control of my company," he said, disbelief evident in his tone. "I'm asking you to acknowledge it was never solely yours to begin with," I corrected gently. "And to accept appropriate oversight of authority you've demonstrated can't be trusted absolutely." The grandfather clock ticked away seconds of heavy silence as Andrew absorbed the reality of his situation. The alternative, immediate exercise of my partnership rights, notification to investors about undisclosed environmental issues, and criminal investigation of the medication tampering, left him no viable path except acceptance. "I'll cooperate," he finally said, resignation replacing calculation in his expression. "However you want to proceed." After he left, Peter and Natalie remained supportive presences as I processed the emotional aftermath of protecting myself from a son I'd once trusted implicitly. "No second thoughts about the conditions?" Peter asked. "They're more merciful than many would have offered." "Mercy isn't weakness when it's consciously chosen," I replied. "Complete destruction of Andrew's career wouldn't undo what's happened or necessarily prevent future misconduct. Structured oversight provides better protection moving forward." The following weeks brought significant transition. Victor and Jessica formalized the oversight arrangements for Cooper Development. Kathy provided her statement to hospital administration, facing professional consequences for her role in the medication incident. The Riverfront project underwent comprehensive environmental review, revealing that proper remediation was possible though costly. Most importantly, I reclaimed my sense of security and autonomy. My home remained mine, its Japanese meditation garden continuing to offer tranquility as I recovered fully from surgery. Natalie visited regularly, our relationship strengthening through honest communication. Peter extended his stay for a month, his presence a healing balm, before returning to his sailing adventures with promises of more frequent visits. Andrew and I established a new, more distant relationship defined by clear boundaries and formal interaction regarding business matters. The maternal forgiveness he perhaps expected didn't materialize immediately. Trust, once shattered, couldn't be instantly restored by apologies or compliance with consequences. Whether genuine reconciliation might eventually grow from this painful recalibration remained uncertain, dependent on his sustained demonstration of respect rather than mere words. What emerged with absolute clarity was my own resilience. At 76, I had faced betrayal by someone I should have been able to trust implicitly, navigated the complex emotional and legal aftermath, and established a path forward that protected my interests while allowing for the possibility of healing on my terms, not his. The partnership agreement had provided crucial leverage, but the true protection moving forward would come from relationships built on authentic respect rather than obligation or exploitation. Some family bonds had proven stronger than I'd realized, others more tenuous than I'd wanted to believe. As summer progressed into autumn, the cherry tree in my meditation garden shed its blossoms and produced fruit, a natural progression that continued regardless of human drama. So too would my life continue, shaped by this painful chapter but not defined by it. I had survived heart surgery and attempted exploitation. Whatever challenges arose next, I would face them with the same clear-eyed determination, surrounded by those who had earned the right to be called family through actions rather than mere blood connection. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.